Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Buenos días a ti, Emma. Hoy la ponente del seminario de hoy nos está hablando desde Estados Unidos y, bueno, a las 7 de la mañana, por lo que te agradecemos mucho primero que hayas aceptado nuestra invitación y luego pues el madrugón que te hemos hecho tener. La doctora Teixeira obtuvo su doctorado en bioquímica y también un segundo doctorado en inmunología y reducción de señales aquí en Madrid, en la Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Y posteriormente estuvo en un estudio postdoctorales en Basilea, entiendo que es, con una ayuda de la Fundación Ramón Areces, bajo la dirección del profesor Spalmer, donde ahí durante su trabajo postdoctoral pues recibió varios premios. Y ya en 2008 se trasladó a Estados Unidos y creó su propio laboratorio donde está como profesora adjunta, como profesora adjunta en el Departamento de Microbiología Molecular e Inmunología en la Universidad de Missouri, que es de donde estás ahora mismo, y ahí continúas, ¿no? Como profesora asociada y en trámites de obtener tu cátedra. Creo que el seminario va a ser muy interesante relacionando la inmunidad celular en infección y en cáncer, y estamos encantados de cuando quieras que nos cuentes. Muchas gracias.
Vale. ¿Me podéis oír bien?
Sí, se oye
Sí.
bien.
Vale, perfecto. Muchas gracias, Marilena. Gracias por invitarme. Es un placer estar con todos vosotros y contaros un poco lo que he hecho a lo largo de mi carrera científica y en lo que nos estamos centrando ahora mismo. Ah, Hoy voy a estar hablando un poco de la idea de qué tipo de señales dentro de lo que es el ambiente que rodea las células T condiciona su habilidad para proteger contra infección en cáncer. Voy a cambiar a inglés, ¿vale? Porque va a ser más fácil para mí explicar algunos de los conceptos, pero en cualquier momento me podéis interrumpir, me podéis hacer preguntas en inglés o en español y me gustaría que esto fuera lo más dinámico y lo más didáctico posible para todos nosotros, ¿vale? Al fin y al cabo, la comunidad científica se beneficia de las ideas que tenemos y del intercambio de esas ideas. Ok, bueno, pues una pequeña introducción. Simplemente esto lo dedico más a la gente joven que está en este seminario, si es que alguna nos puedo ver, desafortunadamente. Pero como Elena estuvo diciendo, yo empecé mi carrera haciendo la tesis en Madrid y tuve en aquel momento me di cuenta de lo importante que era colaborar. La hice en la Fundación Jiménez Díaz con Rafael Bragado, pero teníamos una colaboración muy estrecha con Balbino Alarcón y con Fernando Vivanco. Y luego, otra cosa que quiero enfatizar para la gente joven es lo importante que fue para mí cuando estuve haciendo mis estudios doctorales, el tener la oportunidad de viajar a otros laboratorios fuera de España. Y en este caso viajé al IAI en San Diego y también a Londres, y eso me ayudó a abrir mucho más mis horizontes. Luego hice mi postdoc en Suiza, donde empecé a trabajar desde algo muy in vitro a algo mucho más en modelos de inmunología in vivo. Y luego me mudé a Estados Unidos bueno, desde hace ya tiempo que estoy allí. Y esta es mi universidad. Es la universidad más antigua del Medio Oeste en Estados Unidos. Y me estoy dando cuenta de que no he cambiado el inglés todavía. And then now we are just all have moved to this next precision center. And I'm just mentioning it because my science started very much at the bench, very basic. And now we are moving, thanks to this building where there's a bunch of clinicians and scientists that do more applied science to move our basic research from the bench to the bedside. Okay, so the main focus of my research is trying to understand the role of these cells and in how they balance health and disease. And it's, sorry, this kind of, esto es graciosísimo, esto es el Siri. Bueno, and we are very much focused in trying to understand how T cell immune responses are generated and maintain to enhance protection against pathogens and cancer. That's the concept that we all know as immunological memory. Through the years, we have worked in different kind of infectious models, viral infectious models and bacterial infectious models, and now, and since the last 10 years, we started to move towards cancer, and we work with different cancer biologies in lung cancer, melanoma, pancreas, CRC, and ovarian cancer. But as I said before, with the yin and yang sign, there's a dangerous part of the immune system, and is that when it gets these immune responses get uncontrolled, they can lead to diseases like autoimmunity, inflammation. I don't know if you guys can see me. Inflammation, and then transplant rejection. So we are trying to understand how they are generated, how they can be modulated to combat disease as well. And so if we think about how immunological memory developed through evolution, it developed to protect our bodies against foreign organisms. And it's based on two important adaptive immune cells, B cells and T cells. Most of us know about antibodies, which rely on the on plasma B cells and memory B cells. CD4 follicular helpers are important for that. And this is basically has gathered a lot of attention from the vaccine world. Okay, most of our vaccines really try to enforce this branch of adaptive immunity to protect us against reinfection or infection. But there is another branch of the immune system that is driven or supported by T cells that is equally important, and so far has been kind of forgotten in the context of vaccines. So to understand the idea of immunological memory, we need to go back into how these T cells get generated. And I'm going to take here as an example an immune response against an infection, a virus here. And immunologists like to look at this in the context of the time, okay? That's what you have on your x-axis here. And then how these T cells, okay, change numbers over time, okay? And you can see here from the curve that it goes up and then it goes down. So everything starts with a naive T cell that is in a very low frequency in our bodies. As small as in mice, maybe, you know, that you have like 3 or 4 cells expressing a TCR able to recognize a pathogen. And then they recognize the pathogen through the specific receptor called the T cell receptor that binds antigen, okay? And that signal, together with inflammatory signals, which consist in cytokines and costimulatory signals, drive that naive T cell to become activated and start to duplicate itself, or basically make a lot of copies of it. They expand, okay? And usually this expansion is driven by a strong antigen, a strong foreign antigen that comes from the pathogen. So the cells expand in numbers, the numbers increase, and as they do that, they also change in the sense that when they are naive T cells, they cannot do very many things, but when they are effectors, they actually start to be able to secrete cytokines. And in the case of a CD8 T cell, is able to recognize infected cells and kill them, okay? So you can see there that when you get to the peak of this number of T cells expansion, most of the pathogen goes down, and now these cells are not needed anymore. And to maintain the homeostasis of the organism, what happens is that 99% to 95% of them die, and they left some behind. That is what we call the memory T cells. Now, these memory T cells don't arise like by magic. There are memory precursors, we believe, that are present early on in the immune response, and then they continue their journey maturating and then becoming these memory T cells that can adopt different kind of phenotypes. They can be in the circulation as effector memory and central memory, or they can be in the tissue as tissue resident memory. And these cells are characterized because for two specific qualities. One of them is that they are able to live in our bodies for long periods of time. And the second is that, in contrast to naive T cells, that they cannot do anything when they recognize the pathogen, these ones are ready to act immediately. So you can see how important these cells are and why we are interested in how they are developed. This has a lot of potential for therapies, especially in infection, and then I will tell you a little bit more about cancer. So to start to ask this question, we have to go into a more philosophical concept, and is the idea of how naive T cells adopt different fates. What drives that? Okay. So today there's different kind of phenotypes that a cell can adopt. It can be naive, then it can be a memory precursor, eventually can become effector and die, or it can become a memory T cell that can be central memory, resident memory, effector memory. And so what is driving all of these? Are all of these memory T cells the same, or are some more important than others? Are some more contributing pathology than others, right? And so I'll tell you a story a bit later about a specific type of memory T cell that now is very famous in the field. That's called tissue resident memory cell. And the reason why it's gathering so much attention is because compared to the other memory cells, it seems to provide a better protection against, especially in certain tissues like the lung. It's very important for tumor control and for response to immunotherapies. And then in the context of transplantation autoimmunity, it also plays a detrimental role. So that's what we know, and the way the immunologists in the field started to understand these memory T cells. But then something important is what happens in cancer, because in cancer, T cells are there's an T cell immune response, but somehow it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because instead of becoming memory, these cells that are specific for the tumor become what we call exhausted or dysfunctional. And so that happens in cancer, and it happens also in chronic infection as well. And so the idea is, are these two fates of a T cell, is exhausted T cells and memory T cells different things, or somehow these two paths are connected, okay? And so trying to understand that, is worthy to be looking at what happens in an immune response against tumors. So in the case of tumors, the immunological insult that comes from here, it doesn't go away. It gets controlled and then it comes back. So if we think about a naive T cell that would be able to recognize that tumor is getting antigenic signals all the time. So that's an important thing. The other thing is that because cancer itself, in most of the cases, these T cells are recognizing now weak antigens, okay? And if we are lucky, some patients are lucky and they have mutated version of these self-antigens that become like a strong antigen, okay? That's what we call the neoantigens. The other thing that is important to consider is that now inflammatory signals are not high, but in contrast, they are very low. And so that naive T cell first is not getting very well activated, so it has less chances to get to the tumor. But then second is having this constant stimulation all the time. So right now in the field, what we know is that these naive T cells start to differentiate and can adopt different phenotypes, which is different from what happens in the context of infection. They can be stem cell memory cells that are very pluripotential. They can adopt different fates afterwards. And then they can become this progenitor of exhausted T cells. So these cells are not exhausted yet. They give rise to these effector T cells, and usually all of these three subsets are in circulation, and then they travel to the tumor, where eventually they continue seeing antigen or tumor antigens, and then they exhaust. We also know that there are cells that have a resident memory phenotype that are in the tumor. And so which cells of these are the best for fighting tumors? So by the work of others and ours, we have learned that the cells that are less differentiated, so we are talking about these cells here, are the best to fight tumors, okay? And they're actually the best, the subsets that really respond to checkpoint blockade. So right now, both in mice and humans, what we know is that a naive T cell that recognizes tumor antigen in circulation will become either a stem cell memory that eventually will become central memory or resident memory, or a progenitor exhausted that will differentiate into an effector that in the tumor eventually will exhaust. And so keeping these loop going, this pathway going, is important to fight tumors, such that in cases where patients have high levels of exhausted T cells, will not respond to checkpoint blockade. However, if they have high levels of these cells or these cells, they do, or these cells as well. Okay. So my lab, in a nutshell, what it's trying to understand is how memory T cells are generated, how it's different from the generation of exhausted T cells, and whatever the path is, either they are different fates or they are connected. What we want to know is how to revert that and these exhausted T cells to become memory T cells, at least in the context of cancer. Okay, so how do we start to answer this question? So we are very interested in how T cells, the signals that drive T cells, to adopt these different fates, okay? And as I mentioned before, antigen is key, and so is inflammation. So the idea is to understand how differences in these antigenic signals and inflammatory signals talk to each other to condition or limit the fate of these T cells to become either memory T cells or become exhausted T cells or progenitor of exhausted T cells, okay? And the idea is by understanding how this T cell fate process is controlled, we can apply this to immunotherapies to get the right phenotypes to fight, say, cancer, or in a vaccine against an infection to get long-term maintenance of memory T cells, let's say, specific of a pathogen. So my lab has different projects or different areas of emphasis. Right now in infection, we have made a lot of discoveries around the idea of NF-kappa B because it's a hub for both inflammatory signals and antigenic signals. And we are trying to understand how to fine-tune these signals to control mucosal immunity, very much against respiratory infections. In cancer, we are trying to apply the idea of antigenic signals to modulate T cell phenotypes and improve the design of T cell based cancer therapies like adult T cell therapy or CAR T cells or cancer vaccines. We're also trying to understand at the basic level how to reduce T cell exhaustion. And then we collaborate with clinicians and with cancer biologists and even with chemists. And we are trying to go into how to apply what we are finding in the lab to better diagnostics, developing immunotracers to non-invasively track disease-specific T cell responses, immunoped, and we are also building patient organoid models to guide therapy selection. And so I'm gonna now stop with the basics and go into what we have been working on recently. So we put a lot of effort in understanding how CD8 T cells work because it's very well accepted in the field that these are the best weapon we have to fight against cancer cells. So the idea is, again, can we harness the power of CD8 T cell memory to create more therapies that provide durable tumor immune surveillance? And so the idea, just to go back into the basic concept, is what this naive T cell has to see so we can get a higher yield of cells that are in a phenotype like this one or this one that are basically better to fight checkpoint blockade, okay, or to fight the tumor. And so we started with going back to the other idea that the less differentiated a cell is in cancer, a T cell is, the better it is to fight the tumor. So how can you apply that to therapies? Because antigen is a key signal for T cells, from previous work in the lab, we have found that when we reduce TCR signal, actually the cells generate better memory, okay? So weak TCR signaling actually favors the generation of memory T cells when we compare it with the strong signals. And we have found before too that when these cells that are generated against weak TCR signal are then tested for protection, actually they give a better response than the memory T cells that have arise against a strong signal. And as I said before, that kind of was matching the idea that the less differentiated the cell is, okay, the more stemness, the highest therapeutic efficacy. So we put these two ideas together and then we decided to test them. Okay, so the hypothesis was reducing TCR signal strength during priming will enhance the stemness of these tumor-specific lymphocytes and generate lymphocytes with phenotypes that are associated with superior tumor control. And so we decided to test this hypothesis in a model, in the adoptive cell therapy model, which is basically a model that is applied to CAR T cell therapy, T cell receptor therapy, and TIL therapy. And for the ones that are not familiar with this, so right now a lot of the tumor immunotherapies involve getting the cells from the patients, and then ex vivo these cells are either expanded or manipulated, meaning they are engineered to express CARs or express TCRs, and then put them back. They're put back into the patient to fight the tumor. Okay? But what happens with this therapy is that it's effective sometimes, or it can be very effective at reducing the tumor burden, but it's not so effective at inducing a durable tumor control, which may be a consequence that these cells really fade away and they don't become memory T cells. Okay. The other thing important or interesting, I would say, is that for this therapy, we need high levels, high numbers of T cells, okay, that have to be reinfused in the patients. And for that, the cells are ex vivo expanded with very strong TCR stimulation, high levels of IL-2, and then they go rounds and rounds of stimulation, okay? And if you are following me, you can imagine that that continuous stimulation may lead to the wrong phenotype, okay? So we decided to test the question, the idea that maybe changing the level of antigenic stimulation can lead to tumor-specific T cells that have a phenotype that is more supportive of tumor control, okay, or durable tumor control. With a very, obviously, like all scientists, we took a narrow model. I mean, a model where we can really control TCR signal strength, okay, in terms of affinity. And so this is the OT1 model, okay, for the ones that maybe are familiar with the model, but the idea is that we have a T cell with one specificity, okay, and then we have variants of the antigen, in this case is OVA, that we know exactly how, with which potency is binding to this TCR. So we know what is a strong antigen and a weak antigen, and we have different antigens here, so we can go to the very strong to the very weak, okay? So basically, we optimize this TCR stress. So we play with all of these, and then we play with a cocktail of cytokines, and we go to a point where bringing down TCR signal strength, okay, we could get similar numbers of T cells. Okay, so that's what you see here with the weak. So we were able to keep expansion, okay, we were able to keep cytotoxicity, and then we ask, if our hypothesis is right, maybe the idea of reducing TCR signal strength may lead to cells that are more on the stem side, with more stemness, okay? And that's exactly what we saw. So the weak is the blue here, and what you can see here is that when we reduce TCR signal strength, we got cells, a higher proportion of cells with stem cell memory phenotype, with resident memory phenotype, with progenitor or exhaustive phenotype, is what you see here. And then it's true that there were some exhaustion here. So exhaustion is not significantly reduced, but there was a higher yield of cells of the other phenotypes. And then we went a step further and said, okay, fine. So it looks very well in vitro. It's a habitat effect in vivo, okay? So what we did is treat mice that had tumors with these two conditions, the typical condition of high affinity or high TCR signal strength and weak TCR signal strength. And what you see here, this is a model where there is no Tregs, is that this is the control, so there's no tumor control. The typical stimulation controls the tumor and then it goes back. And then when we put our type of treatment, where we have played with TCR signal strength, we can achieve durable tumor control. It's kind of an artificial model because there's no B cells or T cells in the host mice. So what we did is repeat the experiment in a model that is a bit more physiological. We work with a melanoma model, and basically these are immunocompetent mice. They have Tregs, and we simulate something what happens in the clinic. So basically the mice have the tumors, we irradiate the mice, and then we basically do adoptive cell therapy with our two conditions, the strong TCR signal and the weak TCR signal. And this is what you see here. This is an example of a mouse where there is no treatment, or the strong TCR signal treatment, or the weak, and you can see that when we bring down TCR signal strength to stimulate these cells, now we achieve durable tumor control. We also apply the same concept in the context of cancer vaccines. And so this is the non-treated, that's treated with the typical strong antigen or a weak variant of the antigen, a weak TCR, and then we also can see that in this context we achieve better tumor control. Okay, so that's playing with the antigen. Then we decided to play with the inflammatory part. Okay, so it is very well known that in the context of cancer, the inflammation is very low. And the type of inflammation that works seems to go through this STING signaling, okay? And there's been a lot of effort in the field to generate STING agonists to improve or to potentiate this branch of inflammation, to drive T cells to infiltrate the tumor and then fight the tumor. So it's known that STING controls. So what the story I'm going to tell you here is a synopsis of the story, is how we found how STING controls T cell memory fitness, okay? This is just what I told you before, that ideally memory develops in the context of antigen, that is an inflammation, and that in cancer STING is important. And so what we tested is what happens in the context of a strong antigen when there is a STING, or a weak antigen when there is a STING, okay? And so we know that the way STING works is because STING is basically a rise in cancer cells or in the dendritic cells, and drives the generation of type 1 interferon responses, which acts as an inflammatory signal to T cells to recruit these T cells in the tumors. But at the same time, that's what you see here, the type 1 interferon. It also induces IDO, and IDO also has an effect on T cells. So what we found is that when the antigen is strong, okay, so a T cell that receives a strong TCR signals, and then we push inflammation through a STING, memory doesn't happen. Memory T cells basically are blocked, okay? However, if we inhibit IDO, then we can recover these memory T cells. We apply the same thing to T cells that are responding to weak TCR signals. Now memory is not impaired, memory ensues, and actually high levels of STING signals helps this generation of memory T cells, okay? So we did this experiment where we generated memory T cells, changing the STING and changing the antigenic signals, and then we put them into mice that have tumors in equal numbers, just to be fair, and then check if the tumor control would be different depending on the condition. And what you can see here is no treatment, the tumor grows. When you take the typical strong tumor antigen, there is some control of the tumor. And then when we do a weak variant of the tumor antigen and STING agonist, now we get better tumor control. So we think that this is interesting, especially in terms of how to design tumor vaccines. The idea of not going always with the strong is the best. And also trying to understand the nuances of how the antigenic signals and inflammatory signals talk to each other to get the better results in the context of immunological memory. Okay, so this idea of T cell differentiation and the different subsets that you can get in the context of cancer is very much studied and is an area it's a hot area in the context of basic research. But interestingly enough, when I started to talk with some of my collaborators that are clinicians, that information is not getting to the clinic at all. Okay, so I work with a with an oncologist that works in lung cancer, and he was telling me that the way that he discriminates or he decides, or the protocol to decide which patients get checkpoint blockade therapy or not, is, among others, the idea of basically it's an immunohistochemistry test where they look at if the patient has high levels of PD-L1 or not. So we decided to get some patients that had PD-L1 high levels based on that test, and then see if these are the patients that will receive the checkpoint blockade, if these patients had high levels of the subsets that in theory are the best at responding to checkpoint blockade, okay? So this is human data, and what you can see here, this is a patient that was PD-L1 high, okay? And so it has very low numbers of TPEX, okay? And it has high level of exhaustion, okay? So based on the test in the clinic, that patient would be suitable for checkpoint blockade. Based on the basic research findings, would say it is not. We predict that it will be no benefit from checkpoint blockade, and actually the patient received the checkpoint blockade and he didn't respond to it. So we are trying to understand what this means. Is there any advantage of looking at this in the patients? Is this more predictive of response to checkpoint blockade than the current methods or tests that are in the clinic? Okay. We are also interested in the idea of T cell exhaustion. And so because we have been working for a lot of time in NF-kappa B signal, and what we, let me go with this, okay? So in trying to understand how these two signals, antigen and inflammation, talk to each other, it's important to find common points. And one of these common points in signal transduction is this transcription factor signaling pathway called NF-kappa B. So you can see here that antigen, so the TCR, okay, we are looking at the T cell here. So TCR signals or antigenic signals, TNF signals, co-stimulatory signals like for 1BB, GTR, or CD27, all get together or converge at NF-kappa B. Okay? And some years ago, we found that the TCR is able to control memory through NF-kappa B very early on. Then we also found that later in the immune response, NF-kappa B was having another role to control also memory. Okay, at that point when we were studying this, there was nothing known about resident memory T cells. So we knew that somehow the antigen controls circulatory memory early on through NF-kappa B, and then we know that later there is another role. Okay. So lately, we have been very interested in understanding how these tissue resident memory cells are formed, okay? And we have been, these cells not all the time depend on antigen for their formation and I'm talking about antigen in tissue. But in the case of respiratory infections, they do. And because we have this interest in antigenic signals, we decided to ask the question about how antigen regulates this tissue or antigen or inflammation, these tissue resident memory T cells. This is important in the context of vaccines because for rapidly mutating viruses like SARS-CoV-2, let's say, or influenza, antibody responses fail to provide protection over time as the virus mutates. However, influenza-specific CD8 T cells, or basically any respiratory virus-specific CD8 T cells, are able to control they contribute to eliminate the virus and lead to milder disease. Okay. And usually in influenza, recovery from severe infection is associated with a robust recall of this pre-existing CD8 T cell memory. And this tissue resident memory, CD8 T cells, are actually superior to the ones that are in circulation. And they do limit viral spread, okay? So they can control, basically kill infected cells, okay? But they also limit the spread from one host to the other. On the other side, if they are uncontrolled, they end up in Milan pathology, and they are also involved, as I said before, in other type of diseases. So understanding how they are generated is important. So we plug our question of NF-kappa B to tissue resident, CD8 tissue resident memory cell, in this case, in the context of respiratory infections. So for that, it's important to understand that tissue resident memory cells are triggered by environmental signals like antigen, TNF-alpha, IL-6, 4-1BB, GITR. Interestingly enough, these signals all signal through NF-kappa B. And for TRMs to arise in the lung, they need to receive also TGF-beta signals, okay? And when they do so, these TGF-beta signals drive the expression of some transcription factors like RANX3, EOMIS, and TBET, and other markers that basically allow these cells to fully differentiate into tissue-resident memory cells in the lung. So the idea is all of these environmental signals are going to change during the infection, and how different levels of these signals, okay, are going to condition the generation of these tissue-resident memory cells. Since we didn't know which signal is more important for this, we decided to get the question, basically attack the question by going directly to NF-kappa B. So how different levels of NF-kappa B condition tissue-resident memory? So for doing that, we generated two inducible models where we could, at will, whenever we wanted, enforce NF-kappa B signaling or inhibit NF-kappa B signaling. And so these models have a reporter, a luciferase reporter, that we can detect by flow cytometry. This is restricted, in this model, NF-kappa is restricted to T cells and is titratable, so we can get more signal or less signal. Okay, it's a DOX inducible signal, so depending on the amount of DOX, we can get more or less. And then basically, once we verify the model, we just went and asked the question. So we knew, I said before, that late in the immune response, NF-kappa B has a role. So we decided to tackle the question late and not early, because NF-kappa B signal has a role very early as well, not only controlling memory, but also division, secretion of cytokines, and obviously, if you impair NF-kappa B early, you're going to impair the whole process. So we went directly to what is the role of NF-kappa B in these signals to generate TRM late, okay? And so we either increase NF-kappa B, you're going to see it in red, or decrease NF-kappa B and see what happens with memory T cells. Okay, and hopefully this works. Okay, so first we look at circulatory memory cells, and then we look at tissue-resident memory cells in the lung. And in circulation, what we saw is that we increase NF-kappa B in the T cell, we increase the frequency, and I'm not showing it here, but it's in the publication, and number of memory T cells that are specific of flu. In this case, it's an influenza model. Well, when we inhibit NF-kappa B, we basically decrease the number. This is basically was matching previous data that we had published. And so then we ask the golden question is, well, what happens with tissue-resident memory T cells? It may be the same, no change, or the opposite. And so unexpectedly, what we found was the opposite. So here you see that enforcing NF-kappa B signaling T cells increases circulatory memory T cells. What you see here is that we lose it. When we inhibit here, we decrease circulatory memory T cells. However, we increase tissue-resident memory cells, okay? So basically, the rules don't apply the same for tissue-resident memory and circulatory memory, at least in terms of NF-kappa B signals. Okay, so this is just a synopsis of it. So the idea is that NF-kappa B promotes circulatory memory but inhibits tissue-resident memory, at least in the context of influenza in the lung. Then the next thing is, how do we know this is specific of T cells and not other cells? So we did this fancy experiment for immunologists that is basically we got cells from these mice. So only these donor cells we can control NF-kappa B in these cells, and when we put them in host mice that were undergoing normal stimulatory signals, and then we modulate NF-kappa B in these donor T cells and see if these donor T cells would become TRM or not. And so what you see here is now when that we basically recapitulated the same results. As soon as we inhibit NF-kappa B, we lose circulatory memory. We increase circulatory memory if we increase NF-kappa B, and then for resident memory is the opposite. We lose it when we increase NF-kappa B, and we improve it when we decrease NF-kappa B. So this demonstrates that that signal is CD8 T cell intrinsic. Okay. So the next question was, okay, that's very good, but it's kind of artificial because we are basically cranking NF-kappa B in a genetic way. That's not something you can do with patients. So the next question was, what is naturally driving these NF-kappa B signals? Okay, and so we have different candidates here: antigen, TNF, or one, co-stimulatory signals. And then the next question is, which signal and how? Okay, is it through TGF beta or not? Okay, so to start to scratch the surface on that question, we decided to create a cellular platform where it could help us to identify candidate signals. And so basically the idea is to get T cells, expose them to TGF beta and to different candidate signals or cytokines, and then in the presence or inhibiting or not NF-kappa B, and then see, when you do that, how it modulates two markers that are important for TRM, CD103 and RUNX3. Okay, and we also measure TGF beta signaling in terms of SMAD2/3 to know if this goes through TGF beta or not. So let me explain this. So for example, I'm just going to tell you in 5 seconds that TNF-alpha is one of the candidates cytokines that we saw. Okay, so in normal conditions, CD8 T cells, when they are exposed to TGF beta, they increase the level of phospho-SMAD2/3. That's what you see here in the blue. And also RUNX3, which is a marker of TRM. When TNF-alpha is added, now TGF beta signal is impaired. You see it here in purple. So it is RUNX3, the levels go down. And this goes through NF-kappa B signaling, because when we inhibit NF-kappa B with DOX, so this is with the dominant negative model, now we revert the situation. So basically, the impairment that TNF-alpha does in TGF beta signaling gets canceled when NF-kappa B is inhibited. You see here in the blue line, and so that's for RUNX3. So using this platform, we found that TNF-alpha was important, and then we went a step further and checked if that would pan out in vivo. Okay, so what we did is, in this case, we work with a TCR transgenic model. We get naive T cells. We put it in mice. We infect the mice with influenza that express the antigen that these T cells recognize. And then during the infection, we treat either with an isotype control or with a anti-TNF-alpha. So basically, we block TNF-alpha, and then we look at what happens with these resident memory T cells. And what you see here is that when we block TNF-alpha, we increase the number. Basically, we block TNF-alpha, we decrease NF-kappa B signaling, we increase the level of TRMs. And this correlates with an increase in TGF beta signaling, which is positive for TRMs, and an increase in the level of RUNX3, which is one of the transcription factors that drives TRM. Then we went and said, okay, well, is NF-kappa B also controlling exhaustion or not? So this is very preliminary data. And so what we found is, again, this is preliminary, is that when we increase NF-kappa B signal, we can get cells that are less dysfunctional, and So this is in terms of cytokine secretion in melanoma metastatic model in the lung. And then these cells, when we increase in FK-capsaicin, they seem to have more of these effector cells, okay? So we are still continuing trying to understand this process. And basically that's it for today at least. So this is just my last slide to acknowledge the people in my lab, which is basically composed of PhD students and my collaborators in Missouri. I have a bunch of collaborators. I love to collaborate with people. And also in other universities in Minnesota, in San Diego, in Edinburgh. And with this, I think I would be happy to take any questions.